Hello, this is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, and I am your host, Liv, here with a very special, very timely episode on the Ancient Olympics. Oh, it's good. So on Tuesday, you heard from just me looking at the Ancient Olympics, what we know, don't know, some of the odes that were written to the victors because, there were so many. And I repeatedly hinted at the episode that is this episode that you're listening to right now, which is with returning guest Alexandra Sills. Alexandra joined me towards the end of last year. We talked about gladiators in the Greek world. It was so much fun and so full of, in that case, it was like really gory details. And in this case, there's a little bit of gore. Turns out, Pancration, you could kill people and win the Olympics that way. Or not. You could lose. And the winner could be the dead guy. But more on that to come. But the key to today's episode is truly the way we have and really enjoy talking about the fact that the Ancient Olympics, circa 776 BCE, were always naked. That's right. That's right. Every sport was competed while naked. Save for a small accessory that I will let Alexandra share. In the moment where I laughed so hard I nearly cried into this microphone. And arguably the most I've ever laughed in an episode. Michaela edited it, told me she choked on her laugh. We're doing great. And so, no more hype up. Here it is. Conversations. Real men compete naked. The Ancient Olympics with Alexandra Sills. Alexandra, speaking of naked sports, we're here today to talk about the Olympics. But also just like ancient games and ancient, sports competitions. I'm a sporty person. If you can't tell. Yeah. Sports. Go sports. So I'm so interested to hear like literally anything because I can tell you the entirety of what I consider knowledge of the Olympics, the Ancient Olympics that lives in my head is both they did it naked and it took place, the first one, in 776 BC. It's one of like a handful of dates I have memorized. And that is the extent of my knowledge. So, and also that it took place in Olympia, I should say, but that's pretty easy. Like maybe you start like, why do we know anything about like why they started the Olympics themselves or just the games broadly? Like what kind of history do we have around it?
So the Greeks loved competition, right?
Yeah, they sure did.
We know this. Everything that could be turned into a competition was. And one of them was who can run to the other end of this rectangle the fastest. And shall we turn this into a massive competition that lasts over a millennium? Yeah, cool. Athletics was a huge deal because it made your body strong, which is great if you're a warrior culture.
And also just living in the ancient world, I imagine, too, right?
Yeah.
Like, as somebody who's now turned 36 the other day and, like, aches when I stand up off the couch, like, I imagine, in an ancient world, you want to be active. My should be more.
Click now.
Yeah. Right?
So absolutely, it kept you strong and healthy, which is brilliant in war and your wider life, and it made your body beautiful, which of course, huge deal.
They loved a beautiful naked man. They really did.
Doesn't. So ancient athletics goes way, 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 way back into the depths of antiquity. I mean, obviously, if you read the end of the Iliad, There's
Yeah.
athletic competitions in the funeral games. So 776, the beginning of the Olympics, that's the date of the first recorded Olympics. We assume that there was something before that. But yeah, for the first 13 Olympic Games, there was one event, which was the sprint.
Just running really fast.
So they didn't even have a permanent stadium for the first one. They just picked out a place. The sanctuary was already there and was kind of growing over time. It was quite basic at 776. But yeah, they basically just said, here's where we start. That's where we finish. Go. And it was a 600 feet race because supposedly Hercules had founded the games and he had said how far they should run, and he said it's going to be 600 of my feet. So a stadion means feet.
Yeah.
So yeah, 600 feet is in Olympia, it's 200 meters. I think in some of the other stadiums around Greece it's slightly more or slightly less. So I mean,
love that it wasn't it was like really varied. They were just like, I don't know, you gotta run this.
Yeah,
it's harder in some places. That actually reminds me, sorry, this episode's already going to be slightly unhinged. The only thing I know about Canadian football is that the field is larger than American football, and so technically it's harder. That. I know, that's why I had to say it.
Oh.
So technically it's a harder game.
Declaration of war.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, so you've got to imagine in these early games, and we can see from like who was winning. The cities of the Peloponnese were winning early on. So we can assume that maybe people weren't traveling quite so far to compete. And then as it gets bigger, they kind of start getting overwhelmed by everyone else. But yeah, people were traveling long distances to compete in and watch one sprint that took less than a minute. And that was
did they only do it once? Like, at least did they do the same thing more than once, or was it just one race?
Yeah, so this is something that's kind of cool. The Olympics that people would go to were like the finals.
Okay.
So all of the athletes had to register at Ellis, which was the city that kind of oversaw the games. It was their extramural sanctuary. So you had to go there a month in advance to register. And then all of the preliminary rounds were done in Ellis. So yeah, there were some athletes who may have been the best in their polis, but they get to Ellis and they don't even make it to Olympia itself.
Yeah.
So when you get to Olympia, there might have been the semi-finals and then the final race.
Right.
Because there's only so many spaces on the track, right?
Yeah. No, it makes
so
sense.
Yeah, there would have been hundreds of athletes every year who didn't even get to the sanctuary itself, which is kind of heartbreaking when you think about it. But yeah, it did mean that for all of the people who got there, they'd already, gone through the motions. They knew what they were doing. They'd been training hard. But it did mean that on the final day, you had to race more than once to get the Olympic wreath.
Right.
And they started adding more events as well. So in 74, they added the Diolos, which is double the stadium. So you get to the end and then you turn back.
Okay.
So that's 400 meters.
Creativity.
I mean, you've got to applaud their imagination for that. Yeah. In 720, they added the Dolichos race. That was kind of cool because that's the long distance race. So that's 4,800 meters.
Oh, wow.
So imagine this is happening in the height of summer as well. So
yeah,
that's pretty hardcore. And then they had the weirdest race that they had, which they added in 520, was the Hoplitodromos.
Okay. Oh my god, I'm gonna try to figure no, can't get there.
So hoplite.
Yeah.
Hoplite armor. Dromos.
Oh, so they're wearing the armor.
Running. Yeah, running whilst wearing armor.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, it was about 13 to 15 pounds of armor
Jesus.
on a hot day.
Oh my god. Yeah, I was trying to think like, okay, hoplite, but how does that connect to race? But I mean, it's fairly straightforward. And wow, that would have been
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah, can you imagine?
Nope.
So those were the track events, and they
Yeah.
they were insanely popular. So for the stadion, the sprint, it was so iconic, being, I mean, the first and only, but then, you know, the major event, that the winner of the stadion race in each Olympic cycle, the Olympiad, named that set of 4 years. So you've got historians saying, yeah, this battle happened 2 years after that guy from Athens won the stadion race.
Oh wow.
And that's one of the ways that the Greeks named and their calendar, their years, and marked
Yeah.
time was by who won that race, which
Is
is
it like
pretty cool.
yeah, do you know anything about then how like this is a question I've had on and off and I've just never thought to actually ask someone, but like how we then as like modern people figured out the years?
Oh my god, yeah,
Right?
that's
Like I feel like you'd do like a lot of backtracking. You'd have to like do a lot of like crazy mathematical going cuz it's freaking fascinating.
I think you need to interview someone about calendars because I am
Yeah.
not smart enough to
No,
do
no,
it.
fair. The thought just occurred to me there, but that's so interesting to know
Yeah.
that like that's how that's how they determined the time. I mean, it makes sense now. Like I'm thinking too, like I know Pindar wrote so many things about various competitions and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I don't know how I'm connecting that with like years, but I guess it just kind of makes sense that something like they both align as like just being obviously it was a really momentous thing.
Yeah.
Like it was a really big deal to win. And so yeah, like it defined so many different things.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you were a winner, then you might get tax breaks when you got back home. You might be given free accommodation or free meals or honorary civic posts. So, I mean, there was no monetary prize at Olympia, and there was four main games. Olympia at Olympia.
Yeah.
There were the Pythian Games at
Mm-hmm.
Delphi. There was the Nemean Games at Nemea, and there were the Isthmian Games, which was at the Isthmus of Corinth.
Yeah. So like heavily Peloponnese.
Yeah.
And then like just one which is like not even that far from the Isthmus.
Yeah, and one outlier in Delphi.
Yeah.
And they all happened at religious sanctuaries outside of the city. So Elis is obviously quite away from Olympia. Delphi, the Pythian Games were run by the Amphictyony, the 12 kind of small towns around Delphi that kind of ran the sanctuary itself. The Isthmian Games were run by Corinth, and then, well, I say Corinth, after the Romans destroyed Corinth, Sicyon said, yeah, we'll do it, and then Julius Caesar comes back and refounds Corinth, and they take it back, and everyone in Sicyon's like, oh, okay. And Nemea was started by Cleone, and then that was taken over by Argos.
Right.
And most of them have got like a mythic founder, and there's a big temple, because athletics is inextricably linked with religion. You're doing this as a religious act. So Olympia and Nemea were games for Zeus, Pythian Games at Delphi, obviously for Apollo, and the Isthmian Games were for Poseidon, which is why they really liked their horse racing games at Isthmian, because of course, Poseidon.
Does that connect? I guess up there it wouldn't. I'm just thinking of like the mythological naming of the Peloponnese. Like I could, like there's the chariot race, and I'm just kind of like feeling connections. But I mean, obviously that's closer to Nemea.
Absolutely. So the Olympic Games had several founders, refounders.
Yeah.
Almost. So yeah, Pelops is definitely one of them.
Okay.
And the Temple of Zeus in Olympia had decorations of the preparations for the chariot race.
Oh.
You know the race I'm talking about?
So like the sabotage?
Well, it's Pausanias is describing the statues he sees, and there's two versions of the story. One where there's sabotage and one where there's divine help.
Ah, okay.
So depending on which scholar you talk to, it's either, yes, it was showing the divine help, or no, it was showing the preparation for cheating. But yeah, so the story, as you well know, of the chariot race to win the hand of the beautiful princess of a town near Elis.
And her name is Hippodamia, so that also has some connection to horses. I don't know what the damia is, but like,
absolutely. Well, yeah, because you know the Greeks, they love to call a spade a spade.
Yeah, like horse lady.
So yeah, Pelops was one of the founders of the games. After this, after one of the charioteers died, he was founding the games to kind of atone. Heracles was supposed to refound the games after cleaning out the stables. Another Peloponnesian story.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many mythical backgrounds. So the Isthmian games were supposed to have been founded by Theseus, for instance. And the Nemean games were founded by Adrastus. So you've got all these myths wound in, and there were temples and shrines everywhere in all of these sanctuaries. So those 4 sets of games were known as the Pan-Hellenic games and the Periodos. They were the main 4, and they were organized so that on year 1 you had the Olympics. On year 2 you had Isthmia and Nemea. On year 3 you had Delphi. On year 4 you had Isthmia and Nemea, and then you go back to the Olympics. So every year there's at least one festival.
Wow.
And those were the big 4, but you didn't get any money.
Wow.
For winning. You got a wreath. In Olympia it was olive. In Isthmia and Nemea it was celery. And in Delphi it was bay laurel, because of course, of course. Apollo.
Because Daphne. Celery? Like celery?
Celery, yeah.
Okay.
So you know, just in case you've got tzatziki, you can just, dip. So you won the wreath, and that was the pinnacle.
Yeah.
But there were cities all over the Mediterranean world that had their own games. So the Panathenaic Festival had an athletic component. Oropos had games. Larissa, Delos, Epidavros, Orchomenos, Rhodes, Dodona, Alexandria. Rome joined in and had their own games. So what you could do if you were an athlete is you would use the smaller games to train, to gain skills, and to pick up monetary prizes.
Oh, okay.
Gain a little bit of fame, maybe. And then when you get to the 4 games, you've paid to get there by winning games in other cities.
Yeah.
And if you won your event in each of those 4 places, you'd be called a circuit winner, a Periodonekes, which was amazing. If you could do that, that was like the coolest thing you could do. And it wasn't very often that someone did it. So if you think in the modern games, we've got Olympics and we've got various other games, the Commonwealth Games, obviously. It's very rare for someone to dominate in all of them.
Yeah.
But in the ancient world, if you could do all 4, and the quickest you could do it was 3 years. But if you could do all 4, you were a hero.
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive. Like,
yeah. What's really cool is that there are some guys that did it more than once.
Oh my god. Do we have their names?
We do have the names of some of them. So
I hope so.
There's I mean, I can't say about the Periodonekes without talking about Milo of Croton. He was a wrestler, and wrestling was a bit different from modern wrestling. So it was the first person to get to 3 points won. and you won a point by making your opponent touch the ground with their hip or their shoulder or their thigh or their back. And that counted as a point. And there weren't a lot of rules in wrestling. I mean, you couldn't kick and you couldn't punch and you weren't supposed to gouge. So it was about holds and, like
right.
choke holds, that kind of thing. And again, because of most people were out in the preliminary rounds, but you still had to fight several times in the afternoon to get to the final. And it was all done on one day.
Oh my God.
So you had to go straight from your quarterfinals to the semis to the final. That could take like an hour.
I just think just how sweaty and naked they would have been. Like, that's just, we're into the realm of, that just sounds so gross.
So Milo of Croton was the world's greatest wrestler. He won 6 Olympics, 7 wreaths at Delphi, 9 at Nemea, and I think 10 at Isthmia.
No, that's absurd. That's too much.
So that means that he completed the circuit and became a Periodonikes 5 times.
Jesus.
So if the quickest you can do one is in 3 years, he had an extensive career like we don't see anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, he was like legendary in his own lifetime. So he had a diet supposedly where every day he would have 18 pints of wine, 20 pounds of bread, and 20 pounds of meat. No. Apparently, he turned up to one of the festivals carrying his own oxen on his back, and he just like ate it.
The modern Olympics could never.
When he went back home, the nearby city, I think it was Sybaris, attacked Croton. So he went into battle with all of his wreaths on, dressed as Hercules.
You know what? Honestly, respect. Like, if anyone can get away with that, it sounds like this guy.
I mean, he used to say to people, "I challenge you to bend my finger," and no one could even bend his finger. He was just insane. So I don't think there's anyone who was a Periodonikes more than he was. But yeah, he's so cool. He sounds like he might not have been the smartest tool in the box.
I'm not gonna say I'm surprised. Like, no offense, but I just feel like people have their skills.
So, I mean, he was legendary in his own time, so every legend has to have like a legendary death, right? So apparently he tried to split open a tree trunk with his bare hands.
Sure.
But got stuck and couldn't move. So he was eaten alive by wolves because he couldn't move away from the tree, supposedly. So yeah, I mean, he was a proper superstar. And I really, the combat sports in the ancient world are insane. So there's wrestling.
I was like, okay, I'm waiting for Pancration. I am not at all patiently waiting for it.
So the wrestling seems fairly normal. There were referees.
Points, you said, yeah.
Yeah, there's points, there's rules. Not many rules, but there are, rules.
More than Pancration?
Then there was boxing, which is just, I mean, it's punching them in their head as much as you can. There you go. If the other one gets knocked out or taps out or dies, which absolutely did happen, yeah, you win. And then there's Pancration, which is insane.
The only rule in Pancration is there are no rules and also no eye gouging. Kind of.
No eye gouging, yeah, and I think no biting.
Right, okay.
So in the other two, there's a rule that you're not allowed to grab the genitals. But in Pancration, that was a legitimate tactic, is to just squeeze their balls as hard as possible for them to tap out. That was absolutely a solid tactic.
And Pancration would mean essentially like all powerful, right?
Yeah.
Because Kratos is power.
Power.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was like a mashup of the other two. And you would do anything to win. So we know that they tried to break each other's bones, tried to
Great.
choke each other. People died.
I love this so much because like we really get this idea that ancient Greece was this like really intellectual, like highbrow place, right? That gave us theater and all of this, and it's like, oh, those Romans, like, I mean, I know we would have talked about this in the last time you were on the show, but like, yeah, those Romans are the violent ones, and it's like, okay, but also the Greeks invented pancration, so here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying when I was on before about how gladiators in Greece performed in stadiums. People had been dying in stadiums for centuries before the Romans even toddled over to the
Oh
east.
yeah, toddled over is sorry. That's the best way to describe the Romans doing anything.
So I think that the greatest story about pancration that I can tell, which kind of sums up pancration and Greek athletics completely, is this guy called Erychion of Phigaleia. So again, another Peloponnesian. This was in 564, and I think he'd already won the Olympics before. So he was back to defend his title, and he got himself and his opponent had got him in like a chokehold. And Pausanias is describing the story because he did like a tour of the sanctuary and he's reading out all of the statue bases for us, which is super helpful. Thank you.
I mean, he is unstoppably helpful.
Brilliant man. Yeah, he's telling the story, and there are some modern scholars who happen to do things like jujitsu and stuff, and they will spend articles arguing about, well, his foot couldn't have been exactly there, but for the sake of the story, Erychion was placed in some kind of chokehold, and Pausanias says he was losing consciousness, or he might have been weakening maybe, and his trainer yelled out to him, how noble would it be if they could say that you never were defeated at Olympia? And apparently the light bulb went off, and Erychion said, yeah, okay, I'm not going to tap out. So what he did was he kind of swept the leg, which ended up defeating his opponent. But at the same time, because of the chokehold, it broke Erychion's neck and he died instantly.
Oh my god.
But because he'd won, his corpse was given the wreath and he won the match posthumously.
Wow.
And it was more important to him to win and die than live a loser, because second is losing. I mean, that's like that's dedication. That's like the pinnacle of Greek athletics is I would rather die than come second.
Yeah. Not relatable, honestly.
No, I'm quite happy to sit at home watching the Olympics on TV. I don't need to. Yeah.
I mean, as you're telling me all of this, all I can think of is when you go to the Olympics in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So, like, yeah. I'd rather just do that.
Like... Oh my god! Yeah, there's a side quest in Odyssey which is talking about a real Olympian and his mum, and I'd love to tell this story.
Please, no, I will know it, because the way I know every second of that game is horrifying.
Me too. I play it so much, and my only argument is that they make you wear the pants. Why? Yeah. They should be nude. Yep. So there's this family from Rhodes, and they are like a a generation after generation after generation of victors. They're amazing.
And coming from Rhodes.
Rhodes was a powerhouse of athletics.
Wow.
Yeah, you cannot talk about Olympic glory without talking about Rhodes.
Wow, it's so far.
This family, the patriarch was Diagoras, and he was a boxer. And he now has an airport on Rhodes named after him. So
I've been there then. That's so nice.
So yeah, he's obviously still famous. So he was a boxer. He won twice at Olympia, Delphi, Nemea, and Izmir a couple of times. He had 3 sons who were all Olympic victors. So the first was Damagetos. He was a Pancration winner twice over. And I'm going to say this wrong, Akousileos, who was a boxer. They won, brothers, the same day at the same event. Not the same event, the same day of events at the same festival. And the crowd saw this Olympic victor have 2 Olympic sons winning on the same day, and the crowd rushed forward and they lifted him up, and one of them said, well, you may as well die now, Diagoras, because life doesn't get any better than this. And the story say, okay, I guess I'll die, and supposedly he does. His other son, Dorius, was even better. He was a boxer, and he did Pancration, and he won 3 Olympics, and Delphi and Nemea and Izmir. The cool thing about him was this was during the Peloponnesian War, and the Athenians had taken him prisoner, but they said, oh no, we can't execute you because we've seen you at the Olympics, you're awesome.
Yeah.
We're going to let you go.
Yeah.
And then Rhodes, I think, must have been taken over, so the Spartans or something. The Spartans were like, no, we're going to kill you. We do not care that you're a celebrity. We're going to kill you. So he was executed. He only had daughters.
Oh.
Women were not allowed to compete. They weren't even allowed to watch. There was during the festival itself, there was a zone and women were not allowed in it. So his daughters couldn't compete. That was very sad. So Darius had 2 sons. Eucles won the boxing, and one of them was Paisarodos, and he was competing in boxing. And his trainer was so excited after his win that his trainer jumped over the fence to go and hug him. And that's when everyone said, oh, okay, there's no penis under that tunic. It's a woman. It turned out it was his mum. Her name was Calipatera. She had...
It's all a real story.
It's a real story. Her grandfather has an airport named after him. Her uncles were winners. Her dad was a winner. 2 of her sons were a winner. She had trained her son herself, and she was just desperately wanted to see it. So she dressed as a man, and that's the reason why after her, even the trainers had to be naked.
Oh my god.
So they...
That is the most ancient Greek thing I have ever heard. I'd be like, oh no, the solution to a woman sneaking in because she has every moral right to be there is not to change the rules, but so that women could be anywhere nearby, but no. Yeah. So that everyone has to have their dick out.
I mean, it's so Greek.
Oh my god, is it ever?
So yeah, the penalty for a woman being found inside the sanctuary Temenos during the festival was to be thrown off of the mountain. And we don't know of any times that this did happen, because none of the historians said, yes, this has definitely happened. They just say that that's the threat. But the fact that this woman was threatened with it suggests that they weren't bluffing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the crowd around them started saying, hang on, she's from a family of Olympic heroes. Yeah. Can you not just break the rules once?
Like, for real.
You know, her grandfather, her uncles, her all of them. So the only reason they didn't throw her off of a mountain was because of the men in her family being incredible. So yeah, that little side quest,
Yeah.
100% true.
Well, there are so many little things like that in the game. Like it fills me with such joy every time I learn of one, because like they're endless.
Yeah.
These like little things that like have like, obviously it's made for the game, but have these historical, like accurate
Yeah.
origins. I just
It's so
but now
cool.
also because of you, every single time I go to a theater and I look at the marble like walls, and I'm like, ugh, that's Roman intervention.
It's Roman.
I told people that at my group trip, by the way, and
Woo!
thanked you. I was like, guys, do you see this? Yeah.
It's all Roman, baby.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that family from Rhodes is incredible. But there's another athlete from Rhodes who is the most decorated, I think, Olympian of all time.
Wow.
So he was a track star. He was called Leonidas. And he was called a triastes, which means that he won 3 events in the same
Right.
festival. And that was rare as it was, because for the track events, they were all done on the same day, all of them.
Right.
And all of the combat sports, they were done on one day, and then all the equestrian events all on one day. So if you did more than one event, that meant you were doing your quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals, time and time again. So to be a triastes, you had to have insane strength and perseverance and stamina. And he was a triastes. I think he did Stadion, he did Dialos, and I think, was it Hoplotodromos? He did those. He won all of them for 4 consecutive Olympics.
No, that is unheard. Like, that is wild.
So that means his final Olympics, he won the triple. He was 36. In the modern Olympics, the current oldest sprinter to win a gold medal, British, Linford Christie in 1992 was 32.
Yeah, I mean,
Leonidas of Rhodes was 36 and he won 3 events in a day.
Again, the timing of it's just really ideal. I turned 36 last Friday. And
happy birthday.
I've spent the last 3 days shutting off the alarm on my phone that's supposed to say, do some yoga so you don't hurt so bad.
Like, you mean you haven't won 12 Olympic events, Liv? What have you been doing with your life? So, I mean...
oh, that's incredible.
If you're talking about modern athletics, right, I think the sprinter that comes to mind for our generation has got to be Usain Bolt, right?
Yeah.
He only did 3 consecutive Olympics and he only won 8 medals. The only modern athlete to beat Leonidas's record is Michael Phelps. He has 23 golds.
He has 23 golds?
Just at the Olympics. But 10 of those races were for relays. And the Greeks didn't do team sports because there is no I in team.
No.
So if you take away the relay events, Michael Phelps only has 1 more gold than Leonidas. And he is the only modern athlete to even come close. It is incredible. Leonidas of Rhodes, I don't think we are ever going to see a track star who can be that consistent and have that stamina over such a long career. I don't think we're ever going to see that again.
No, I mean, that is wild. Like that, I'm also because like even in our time, like Michael Phelps is pretty well acknowledged as being like a freak in that way. Like I mean that kindly.
Yeah.
Like in a like, oh my God, he managed to do that when people can't do that typically,
Yeah.
And so to imagine that this man was doing such similar things 2,500 years ago at 36.
Yeah. And I think when you think about Michael Phelps as well, there are so many swimming events. There's butterfly and all of those. But when Leonidas was racing, there were only 4 track races.
Yeah.
So
Phelps has a lot more opportunity too. Yeah.
So I think if you look at it, if you choose, if you were to force Michael Phelps to only do 3 events, he still wouldn't have beaten the record.
Yeah.
Which is insane.
No, that's
so
wild.
Rhodes Rhodes was like an athletic. I don't know what's in the water in Rhodes.
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine by his 4th Olympics, he just won because everyone said, why? Why
Yeah,
are we
exactly.
trying?
Why are we bothering? This guy's
'Cause
36 and he's still going.
he would be beating people old enough to be his son.
Yeah. Also, don't remind me that 36 is that old. That makes me very uncomfortable. But, like, yeah.
Yeah, it's insane.
Wow.
So I think with all the pomp and pageantry of the modern Olympics, I mean, people talk about once in a generation talent.
Yeah.
It's like once in a millennium talent.
Yeah.
Leonidas of Rhodes. He's so cool.
The fact that his name is Leonidas, too, like,
Yeah.
like, that's great. And so far from Sparta, you're like, I mean, I don't think he probably wasn't necessarily named for, well, you know, the famed of Thermopylae. I mean, it just means like something of a lion, right?
Yeah.
I would imagine. I think we both don't actually know ancient Greek, so I'm glad I asked you these things.
But yeah, I mean, so to be a Triastes was pretty special. I mean, there was only one person who managed the combat triple. Because I mean that would be so much harder to wrestle and box and pankration and win all of them in one day. That's insane.
No.
So there's only one guy who's ever managed that in the history of the Olympics. That was Clytomachos of Thebes, and he put his victories down to his training regimen, which was no sex.
That's the whole regimen?
What I think is really cool as well is that the historians writing about him say they specify no women and not even a boy.
Jesus.
Yeah, he in fact, so the story goes, if he saw dogs mating in the street, he would avert his eyes. But I mean it worked because it wasn't it wasn't at the Olympics, it was at Isthmia, but he is the only recorded person to do the triple in combat sports, which is incredible. I mean, I cannot stress enough how bonkers the combat sports were.
I can't even imagine.
There was one match at Nemea, it was a boxing match, and it was Damoxinos of Syracuse and Kroigos of Epidamnos. And with boxing, it was the only sport where you wore some clothes apart from the hot-footed drummer. They had long lengths of leather, about 2 meters of thin leather straps that they'd wrap around the hands, like boxing gloves, like right?
Yeah.
But a boxing glove now is supposed to soften the blow.
Yeah.
These were to make the blow worse.
Yeah, harder. Yeah. Easier on your hands and harder on the face. Yeah. Like, oh my god.
Their match, they'd got to the final, and the match just was going on forever. Neither one of them was tapping out. Neither of them were being knocked out. It was just going on forever. It was getting dark. So eventually, they said, okay, we will just do a knockout. You punch me, I punch you, undefended, and the first person to get knocked over, they lose, right? So Kroigos of Epidamnos, he punches first, and closed fist, as you're supposed to, hits the other guy's head like you're supposed to. Right, fine. Didn't knock him out. Damoxinos decides that he's going to literally go for the low blow. So instead of a closed fist, he kind of has his palm open fingers extended, and instead of going for the head like you're supposed to, he punches his fingertips into Kroigos's torso, and Pausanias says it, he grabbed the viscera and pulled them out. And Kroigos, I mean, he's dead immediately. Well, he's dead, right? Yeah. Obviously. But because Damoxinos had cheated, because it was supposed, the gentleman's agreement had said blows to the head.
Yeah.
And also they counted because it wasn't a closed fist. That was also verboten. So again, you find another corpse being crowned on technicalities. So, I mean, even boxing could be insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely
wild.
Yeah, bonkers.
I
Yeah.
like I just love them. They're such that like I mean the ancient world. I clearly could hear about it forever, but I just love this like weirdest stuff, especially when you think of the Olympics now. And I'm so glad you recommended this episode. Like it's like it's,
It's so boring.
imagine, right? Like they could never. Though in hockey, I have to say, they might get fairly close.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I'll give you hockey. It's not going to happen in curling, but it might happen in hockey. They had their own version of a pentathlon, so that was cool. So they had javelin, discus, long jump, the sprint, and wrestling in, we think, roughly that order.
Wow.
And in Olympia, there were special discuses. For the first 3 events, it was your best out of 3 attempts. And there were special 3 discuses that were kept at Olympia for this purpose. So that they couldn't cheat. You couldn't bring your own and it was lighter, you know. So it's standard weight.
That's also a quest line, but with the spear.
Yes, it is. You have to go find a javelin. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh my God, Odyssey is such a cool game.
It's the best.
So with pentathlon, you had to, it was the first person to win 3 events. We don't really have a lot of rules on what happened if no one did win 3 events.
Okay.
Which I suppose is possible. We also don't know, I mean, if someone won the first 3, did they just stop? I mean,
yeah.
we're not actually kind of sure because none of the writers are writing for people who don't know the rules. Yeah, they're all writing, you know what's going on. This happens. Yeah, thanks guys. That's really helpful 2,000 years later.
Story of the ancient world. I feel like there's so many things like that where it's like I really could have used you guys writing a little bit more down. Like let's make less assumptions about what people do and don't know.
So for instance, javelin, was it from a run up? We don't know. Discus, did they do that from standing and just curling back like the Myron statue, or did they do, you know, like the spinning around in a circle? We don't know. Long jump from art, we think it was from a standing jump, possibly because they're jumping with their feet together on, like when you sit on vases and stuff, and they were holding weights to kind of propel them. Even then, they were achieving some lengths that, you know, they find difficult today.
Yeah.
So the pentathlon was really cool. Although some people at the Olympics kind of thought it was less than because you didn't really truly master one thing.
Right.
So there was almost like a snobbery against some pentathletes. But what's really interesting about pentathletes is that archaeologists have found one statue of an athlete. One.
Yeah.
It's in Taranto, which used to be called Tarentum, which is in the south of Italy. It was a Spartan colony originally. And they found a burial of a skeleton in a sarcophagus with 4 Panathenaic vases. Because at the Panathenaic Games, you didn't win a wreath, you got something of, you know, monetary value.
Yeah.
You got olive oil in these really wonderfully decorated special purpose vases.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was olive oil, you know, a metric ton of olive oil if you want.
Yeah.
So he was buried with those, and, you know, very clever osteoarchaeologists have looked at him and his bone structure and muscle markers and worked out, we think he's a pentathlete because he's got one arm that's stronger, which shows that he must be throwing javelins and discus, but he's also lean, which is great for running, but he's also quite stocky, so that's great for wrestling. So we think he must be a pentathlete. So I mean, I think it's kind of cool that it's one sport that had a bit of snobbery around it, but it's the one skeleton that we have to study Greek athletics. It's a pentathlete. It's like a big middle finger up from antiquity.
I think it's also really helpful because, like, it spans so many of the competitions. Like, it's almost quite lucky where you're like, okay, well, we don't have a skeleton who just did wrestling or just did boxing. Like, you get you get kind of like a broader swath of the
And I mean, I think we are assuming that perhaps with pentathlon, if you got to, say, the sprint and you hadn't won anything, they might have dismissed you. So there might have only been a couple of people running the sprint. And I mean, assuming mathematically it is possible that you wouldn't need to get to the wrestling.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of playing that event. Do you just get really good at the first three so that you win them all? Or do you kind of concentrate on stamina and you know that you're great at the wrestling, so you hope that you're going to get to the final?
Yeah. It's a risky strategy.
Yeah.
Picking like what you're going to focus on.
And I think the thing that we have to remember as well is that the people watching these games, they watch these all the time. People would train in their local gymnasium frequently. They knew what these were talking about. They were watching with a level of kind of expertise that gave them a sense of appreciation. So they were absolutely watching for skills and techniques and being able to kind of, critique and say, well, I would have done it that way. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
What I think is also cool is the equestrian events were awesome. So there's Tethrapon, which is 12 laps around the hippodrome, which in Olympia, sadly, I think it got washed away by a river. So the hippodrome's gone. You can't see that anymore. And that was with a 4-horse chariot. They also had Sonoris, which is a 2-horse chariot race. And then they had Kellers, which is just horseback. And if you've been to the Athens, the museum at Athens, there's the bronze statue of the jockey.
Oh, yeah.
The Artemisian jockey. So that's kind of gives you the idea. Kellers was 6 laps and there were no saddles and nothing like that. You just kind of clung on for dear life. And the really cool thing about that is that there's also a sex position offered by Athenian prostitutes called Kellers.
I love it.
And I think we can all guess, what that position might be. With the equestrian events, it was really dangerous. For instance, if you go to see Roman circuses, there's like a big masonry barrier called the spina down the middle. So you go up one way of the spina, you turn around and you come back. So there's no one possibly going to crash into you going in opposite direction. Yeah. They didn't have that in Greek hippodromes. So you had to be really careful that you got out of the way of the people that were still coming around. So there were frequent crashes. We know of one race where the rider came off, but because the horse was well trained and kept going, it still won.
Amazing.
And the equestrian events, they were quite, it kind of shows the wealth disparity of Greece. Because to have horses and train them, you had to be insanely wealthy, right? Mm-hmm. These are thoroughbreds. So that involved a huge investment. On the other hand, these rich guys aren't dumb enough to put themselves at risk. So the actual athletes, the jockeys and the charioteers, were all enslaved people. Because who cares if they get trampled by a horse, right? It's not them that's winning. It's the chariot owner, the horse owner.
Yeah.
So that kind of sucks when you think about it like that way, because it was incredibly dangerous and incredibly tricky. I mean, controlling 4 horses is tricky. And these enslaved people were obviously highly trained, but we don't know their names.
No, we wouldn't.
Of course we don't. We know the names of some of the owners. For instance, Alcibiades, he was a chariot owner.
Of course he was.
There was one race in the Olympics and he entered 7 chariots and they all got to the final. And he came in 4th, 2nd and 1st.
Michaela's gonna love that you just told that Alcibiades story. He is just the wackiest guy.
Oh, yeah. He's insane. Apparently, he got in trouble. I think he borrowed some of like the official Athenian gold
sure,
dinnerware to take with him for his.
That sounds so right.
I mean, he's not the cockiest person I can think of. The cockiest athlete I can think of is Eubotus. He was from Libya. I can't even remember which event he was in, but he was so sure that he would win. One of the things that either you would do or your city would do to celebrate your win, because it was a huge, it's kudos everywhere, they would make you a statue of yourself to place in Olympia, so that all athletes going into the stadium in the Hippodrome, they'd walk past the statues of previous winners, you know.
Of course.
And there'd also be statues of you at home. He was so sure that he was going to win. He had his statue made before the Olympics and brought it with him.
Brought it with him?
I mean, he did win, to be fair.
What a dick.
But I mean, I think that's more cocky than having seven chariots in one race is, you know, spreading your bets. But having your statue made before you even get there is just...
Yeah.
That's the cockiest I can think of. So yeah, the Olympics, they were the big ones. There were a couple of weird events that kind of came in and out, and you don't see them very often. They had like mule racing at one point. But when you get to the other games, you get some weird events, right?
Okay. Sorry, I want to hear more about that, but before we leave the chariots, there's a woman. She's like the only woman who won the Olympics, right?
Because I forget her.
Because I remember learning about her when I covered Sparta, and the only reason she was able to win, right, is because it was her horses.
Yeah, so she owned them and she trained them, but she wasn't the charioteer. Her name was Caniska. It was in 396 BCE. I think she's fairly elite. In some of the books they call her a princess, but of course I don't think she was a princess. But she was obviously, you know, loaded. So yeah, that was the first female victor because of a loophole.
Yeah.
The winner doesn't actually have to do the event.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I mean, I'm sure that her enslaved people were unfortunately treated very poorly, especially because she was Spartan. But
yeah,
a lady won.
Yay for feminism.
Yay. And real quick before we move on to the weird stuff, because I'm going to start with something weird. Do we know, did they oil themselves up in like Pancration, to make it like harder for them to grab and stuff?
They did that for all of the events, actually.
For all of it. Amazing.
What you would do, and there's special changing rooms. If you go to Nemea, for instance, on your way to the stadium, which has been excavated fairly recently, you walk through the changing room and then through the tunnels to the stadium. So you can imagine, you know, all these muscle guys getting naked. So you would strip down because you had to compete naked. You would oil yourself, scrape it off, oil yourself again, add some dust.
Ugh.
So this was protection from the sun.
Right.
And also, you know, it did make life a bit more difficult if if you were a wrestler or a pancratiast. And then on the way out, you would go through the process again, scrape it all off. You've got to imagine, you've got to hope that this oil is scented, because there are barely any hygiene facilities.
Yeah.
So Olympia and the other sites as well, they're religious sanctuaries. They're not towns.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until centuries, you know, they built a small baths. And even then, some of the people were like, "You're going to the baths, you wimp."
Showers are for suckers.
If the athletes wanted to wash off, they had to go to the river.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you've got, say, 40,000 people swarming in from across the Greek world, and they're all camping, and the only place that they get their water is from the river. And, you know, if they're... you know, the hygiene... you know, you want to be upstream, is what I'm saying. It was like there was a Roman Herodes Atticus built a fountain for people to wash their hands in, and that was that's centuries into the history of the
Yeah.
because these people, they were all camping. Even the athletes were camping. Some of them had great pavilion kind of tents, but most people, if you were visiting and it was swarming with bugs and diseases, so it wasn't exactly a pleasant place to be. But yeah, they did try to keep themselves as clean as possible with the oil, and the scrapings could be sold as a medicinal. You see, this I find cool because there's a myth going around that gladiators sold their sweat as an aphrodisiac.
Yeah.
I cannot find a single source for this. I don't know who made it up, but it's bullshit. It didn't happen. But the sweat scraped off of athletes was considered medicinal and sold as such in the Greek world.
That's so gross. I love it.
So, yeah, I mean, they don't do that anymore. Can you imagine the merch stall at the Olympics? Oh, God. So, yeah, that the Olympics and these other events, they were crowded, they were noisy. But it was also kind of the Greek world coming together once or twice a year at these big events. You could see and be seen. You could spot celebrities, the kind of people that Thucydides was writing about. You could see them in the flesh.
Alcibiades is there, rocking his
exactly. Herodotus turned up one time, and he sat in the Temple of Zeus reciting his histories for people, because at that point he was, he was pretty famous himself. So he was reciting his histories to like a crowd of fans. There was a tyrant of Syracuse called Dionysius I, and he turned up and he decided that he was going to recite poetry for people in between the events. And he was expecting them all to clap like they did back at home. One of the most powerful men, and the crowd's just laughing at how awful his poetry was, which has got to do something to your ego.
I mean,
poetry was one of the things that was unusual because it was missing from the Olympics. When you went to the Nemean Games and the Isthmian Games, and particularly the Pythian Games in Delphi, they had other events such as hymn singing. You could win for that. Singing songs with or without a lyre accompaniment. The pipes, the aulos, the double reed pipes. At Delphi, there was a painting competition.
Oh my god, adorable.
Tragic acting, poetry recitals, prose recitals. It's interesting that at Delphi, women were allowed to compete in not just the artistic things, but in the track as well. They had.
Oh my god.
At the Olympics, we know that women weren't welcome. They had a smaller set of games called the Heraean Games for Hera. But that was for unmarried girls. It was one race. It's not a huge deal. But at Delphi, it's all a bit more kind of stagey. That would be the games that the theatre kids went to. And there were, various other events. The Hippios wasn't at the Olympics. It was at the other games. That was 4 stadion laps. So that was like a mid race. But you had, I think I'm right in saying that the modern iteration of the revival of the Olympics did have painting in the first couple of years, and you'd see these Edwardian gentlemen painting for a gold medal. That absolutely comes from the ancient world.
I love that.
At the Panathenaic Games,
I could do.
I could do a stick man. I could. At the Panathenaic Games, there were torchlit races. They're kind of cool.
Yeah.
So each games had their own vibe. For instance, at the Panathenaic Games were kind of xenophobic because they had a set of games that were for locals.
Athens?
Who'd have thunk it? They had events that were for locals, and then they had events that, foreigners welcome.
Right. But
How kind.
Athenians, I'm sure too, not
Yeah.
just locals, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you
Yeah.
wouldn't. You had
They
to
had
put up a
some
fight.
rules.
So the Panathenaic Games, because the Athenians, I mean, whatever you think about them, they did us a favour by writing literally everything in stone. The epigraphic habit is the curse of undergraduate students, but the blessing of, you know, everyone else. And it kind of, there's a list of how much you won for each event.
Yeah.
And what you won kind of tells you how important that event was considered.
Yeah.
So the Stadion race, which is the most important one in Olympia, that gets you 100 amphoras of oil.
Wow.
But the
That sounds like it'd be a lot. I have no frame of reference, but it sounds like a lot.
It's a huge amount. But the pentathlon, you only got 60.
Right.
The pancration would get you 80, but wrestling would only get you 60. The 2-horse chariot race would only get you 40 amphoras.
Huh.
So it kind of gives you an idea of priorities.
Yeah.
In Athens, at least, because as we've said at the other ones, you get the same vegetable wrapped around your head. So yeah, it gives you an idea. And then there were some swimming races at some of these smaller festivals. I think there was some boat racing at the Panathenea. So
that's cool. Where
yeah,
would they race?
I guess it must have been in
river?
Phaleron Harbour.
Okay.
I don't know. So obviously their games are in the Panathenaic Stadium, which, by the way, looks the way it does because of a Roman.
It screams Roman.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Well, and also a modern. It's also been like
heavily restored.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they got rid of one of the gladiatorial things when they heavily restored it for the revival of the modern game, so I'm ever so slightly salty about it. But yeah, if you want to see a traditional Greek stadium, you go to Olympia, which is just a standard rectangle and grassy banks. That remained pretty much unchanged for the whole time. But in some of, especially the cities of Asia Minor, under Roman influence, let's add a big bunch of stone to it.
Yeah, because it would have been like probably wooden seats, though, right?
At Olympia, you sat on the grass.
Oh, you did? Okay, interesting.
At some of them, there were like wooden bleachers, but most of the times you were sat or stood on the grass. Because even though this was where all the events, apart from the equestrian events, took place, even the combat sports took place in the stadium.
Yeah. I know, because in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, that's where I went. So.
So Assassin's Creed gets it wrong because even their stadium is partially monumentalized.
It's all stone,
yeah. It never looked like that. People go now and they see the grass and they think, oh, where's the rest of it? That's what it's always looked like.
Yeah.
When they dug it up a couple of 100 years ago, they've kind of left it as they found it, and that's how it looked for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Keeping it real in
Well, just shows that sometimes they were like, it was more about the thing, not the location. Like they were more concerned with the competition itself. They didn't have to make the stadium look super fancy.
Well, I think it's because it's a religious festival. Mm-hmm. When you look at the temples in these places, they're where you get the huge monumentalization and the altars and the statues. You can put all of your wealth and ostentation there, whilst keeping, the business end of it kind of, just bare bones.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you think about some of these buildings, Olympia had one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. In the Temple of Zeus, the statue inside of Zeus, which if you've watched Disney's Hercules, that's the one that comes to life. That statue was one of the wonders of the world. It was made by Phidias, who had been one of the artists for the Acropolis.
Yeah.
He was banished. He'd
Sorry,
built.
I think I can tell both of our faces are just connecting to Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
Exactly, because you have to take him to. Yeah, exactly. So
and then you have to help him because he's like stuck there, and you got to go on that statue because he made it in this Spoilers, but something happens.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, he'd built the statues of Athena on the Acropolis. He was
Yeah.
banished, so he said, "You know what? I'm going to build a bigger one to Zeus. F you." And he did, and it became incredibly famous. And we don't really. I think it was kind of eventually it was dismantled and carted off to Constantinople, and then kind of disappears from the record.
Mm.
But that was one of the wonders of the ancient world.
Yeah.
You don't need to tart up the stadium. Why?
Yeah.
This is what you're concentrating your monumentalization on.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Delphi, Isthmia, they've all got massive temples. I think.
Yeah, because that's the priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cool thing that you can do is if anyone is thinking of visiting Greece, you can become a Periodonikes really easily if you rent a car. So if you start off from Athens, you can do your little Panathenaea and you can go to the Panathenaic Stadium. Start off there, make some prize olive oil to fund your trip, right?
Run
Rent
really
a car.
quick.
You can go up to Delphi really easily and then back to Athens. And then if you just kind of go down the motorway, down the Peloponnese, you can go to Nemea on the way down, go down to Olympia and maybe stay the night, and then back up Isthmia on the way back and home to Athens. And it takes 3 days to do it all, and you can see all of the sites and kind of compare how they sit in the landscape and what their temples look like, and they've all got fantastic museums.
I love a Greek regional museum. I could talk about them forever. I'm obsessed with, just all of the, like, they're often so understated, and then they'll have the most incredible stuff, and I love it.
These ones in particular have got incredible. You can see the discuses, you can see the weights for the long jump, and the stadiums. I mean, at Olympia you can run the track, and it's still got the starting line, so you can lean down and do the start. We took my daughter just after her first birthday, and one of my happiest memories is we went to all of them, but we went to Nemea, and I told her the story of the Nemean lion, and it made her giggle. And then I carried her and kind of jogged along the track and made her giggle. It's one of my favourite memories in the world. But yeah, you can go and you can race in these places, and you can, I don't know, wrestle your travel mate in these places if you want. And you absolutely should, because if you can rent a car, it's an easy trip, and you can be a Periodonikes and do it yourself.
I love it.
Everyone should, as far as I'm concerned. I'm dying to do it again.
I mean, I would love to do it. I just need a driver's license.
Yeah, that's. I married someone with a driver's license. Does that count?
Yeah, this is why I collect friends that go with me. Yeah, so
exactly.
I get it. Yeah. Well, that just made me think of it, but this is a perfect time to kind of like say my little nerdy thing that I somehow only just realized, but as of probably around when this comes out, it will be my 20th anniversary of visiting Athens, which is a horrifyingly long time because my mom took my sister and I when I was, I guess, 16. And it was like a week before the Olympics were in Athens for the first time, and I don't even know how long, or like in Greece for the first time, I don't even know how long. So it was very, which we did not care at all, but we really just registered it because the metro was new and nice. We were like, oh, thanks, Olympics. But I love it. I mean, I like that we're also releasing this around the 20th anniversary of the Athenian Olympics. I'm just holding on to various keep it Greek.
I think they should have kept it Greek. They should have all been nude, damn it.
I mean, I've already decided on the name of the episode, and there's a connection there. I won't give it away. Well, I guess the listeners would have already seen it. I think I'm going to call it Real Men Compete Naked.
One thing I will say is that they did have a little accessory.
Yeah, to hold it in.
Yeah.
Right? Keep their business in check.
I love it. It's called the dog leash, the Kunadesmi. And it was like a leather strip. Because you were competing nude, but there's two things you don't want to happen, right? When you're running along, you don't want it bouncing from side to side, because it's distracting and I'm guessing kind of painful. I don't know. People with penises can write in and tell us if that's painful.
I mean, yeah. I it's almost like women should have been able to compete. We don't have as much swinging around.
I mean, we do.
That's not true. I know I said it, but then I realized I don't.
Heavy duty.
Yeah. I don't. So fine.
So I guess this was like the sports bra for testicles. I don't know.
Perfect. Like a jockstrap, but in the ancient world. The dog leash.
The Cunedesmi, the main function of it was that it was fine if people saw a penis. No one was gonna... Men could see other men's penises. It was fine. Women, they weren't invited, but you could see a penis. That wasn't a big deal, but you couldn't see the head. No one wanted to be able to see the head, okay? So what the Cunedesmi would do is you would pull your foreskin down as far as it could go, and you would tie it off tight. So like when you're making sausages, and you twist the end so that the sausage meat doesn't come out of the casing. Yeah. So you would tie the foreskin up in a little bow, and then you could either pull up the penis and kind of tie the Cunedesmi around the base of the penis so that it was like pointing to your belly button, and that would help when you're running. Or you could have a little belt attached with and attach it to the belt. And I mean, like tailors ask men if they dress to the left or the right. I guess you could decide which side it pointed. I don't know. I don't have a penis. I need to, I don't know, do some research on this.
Do you?
I mean, my husband is not down for it. I will say that. I have asked and he has said no.
It doesn't sound pleasant.
He's going to kill me when he hears this. So yeah, they didn't really run truly nude because they had to have their little like bow on the end. You gotta
hide the head.
Yeah.
Tied up in a nice little bow.
Like a present.
This feels like the right place to end it, but I don't know if you have more to say. I just think even if you do, I'm gonna cut it. So this is the end. It's like I'm dying.
I mean, yeah, it's So if one thing people take away from this is that when you're watching the modern Olympics, just imagine them naked with a little bow around their todge.
Perfect. And happy opening ceremony of the Olympics to us all.
Oh my god, I am supposed to be a serious scholar.
No, that's why you're on my show. You can be serious with other people. That's not me. Oh my god. Well, I don't think I need to say that was an incredibly enjoyable episode. But do you want to tell my listeners like where they can read more from you and stuff? And I don't know if you're allowed to talk about the thing that's coming in the future, but if you are, feel free.
Oh, I might make the announcement. So you can read more of my work on Bad Ancient. For instance, I do have an article on there about whether Greek athletes had six packs.
Amazing.
So that's kind of cool.
I'm going to link to that.
I also write a lot for working classicists, and there will be some more Olympics stuff for them popping up soon. And I am writing a book.
Yeah.
About gladiators in the East, which I've spoken to you about, so thank you for that. So if you enjoyed that episode, keep your eyes peeled. Please buy it, please.
And it's not an academic style, right? It's more like for commercial audience.
I'm writing firmly for a general audience, which I think
that.
It's I like to do.
Yeah,
and I hope...
me too. That's why I emphasize it. Like that's the best way, especially for gladiators. Oh my god.
Yeah,
make you way more money, girl.
They're so cool. So yeah, I'm hopefully we'll have a finished book soon, and I'll keep you updated on where you can buy it when it comes out.
Well, I'm sure I'll have you on the show if you want to come back to talk about it.
So. Oh, I suppose I could. Yeah, if you really must.
I don't know. I don't think it'd be very fun. Thank you so much for doing this. It was so much fun.
It was. Thank you so much for having me back. This has been a scream.
Nerds, thank you as always for listening. That was such a fun conversation to record. Truly, like, game-changing good. Oh my god, we had so much fun. I'm so thrilled to release it to you guys and to have it coincide with the Olympics because, you know, in between watching gymnastics and people swimming in the cesspool that is the Seine, you can learn about the ancient Olympics, the origins of the Olympics, which were, in a word, unhinged. But in the best possible way, because that is the nature of ancient Greek history. Just utterly, wildly bizarre and truly a joy to learn about. So I hope you liked this episode. I sure did. Let's Talk About Myths, Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert. Michaela Smith is the Hermes to my Olympians, my assistant producer. The podcast is part of the iHeart Podcasts network. Listen on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. If you are listening on Spotify and you feel the need to leave me a comment, amazing, thank you. Please make it nice. If it's not nice, it's not amazing, and I don't thank you. Also, stay tuned. In the coming weeks, we are going to be announcing a whole lot of new things, including an incredible special series on Euripides, the man, the plays, the legend, I don't know, everything we can possibly find. We have so many guests lined up. It's going to be really great. But not only that, we are also going to be launching a new logo, new merch, a new merch store, and a subscription service that will offer ad-free options. So listen in on the podcast because I will be announcing things, but also follow me on Instagram because that is going to be the best way for me to get things out quicker. Stay tuned. I am Liv, and I love this shit.